I am Beto, and you're watching Modern Immigrant. Welcome, everybody, to a new episode of Modern Immigrant. If you're new, I want to tell you that, you're in a space where we're going to be talking about immigration, and I am Beto, the creator of this podcast, and I'm excited that you are here. So, I also want to share that for the ones that don't know, we have episodes in both English and Spanish. So every week you're gonna get a different language episode, okay? And today Shehla is sharing her journey of immigration, which I have to say, I'm fascinated with this story and with this episode. It has a lot of things that I was able to explore, to ask, and to learn, which at the end, I think that's the main goal of this podcast, that we're able to connect and learn from other stories. So Shehla was born in the USA and she moved to Pakistan, where her family is from, when she was a kid. Then later on in life, she came back to the US after getting married as an adult. And she experienced a different experience as an immigrant, right? Being from here, having all the papers, having the citizenship does not mean that you're not an immigrant, does not mean that you don't go through a lot of the challenges. Shehla is also a podcaster, and that's how we connected. She has an amazing podcast that's called Muslim and That's Okay, which I'm gonna leave over here an image if you're watching us on YouTube, and please go ahead and check it out. You're gonna learn from her experience as a Muslim and how does she perceive her life, and you're gonna be able to connect with Shehla in so many different levels. I think that's her purpose with her podcast, and we talk about it in this episode as well. We talk about what being a Muslim means to her and how does she live her life. It's interesting to see that for the both of us, we were able to connect in so many different levels, and I think at the end that's exactly what we have to explore, different cultures and people with different backgrounds, so we can learn from each other and see that there's way more things that connect us than the things that tear us apart. So I really hope you enjoyed this episode, enjoy this interview, and learn from her amazing journey and perspective. And don't forget to subscribe if you're watching on YouTube or if you're listening, whatever you're listening. Leave us a review, stars, everything helps. And thank you for being here. Enjoy. So Shehla, welcome to Modern Immigrant. I'm so happy and I'm excited that you're here with us today doing this interview. And we were already chatting and saying how wonderful it is that we were able to connect through the She Podcast Facebook account. I have a friend that recently started a podcast and I told her that she needed to get on that. Yes. Facebook, I don't use Facebook that much, but I do use that page. Like that's the one that I do check. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. And it was a surprise. It's like you said, it's such an important, I guess, group for all of us, when we can connect in so many different ways. So, but again, thank you for wanting to interview me.
You're welcome. And even now, I feel like thinking about the quarantine and all this time that we have been at home and away from people and away from family, I think like it's even more important that we create this spaces and these connections. Like we can still meet people. We don't have to go out. So I'm excited. And I usually start the interviews, Shehla, by asking my guests if they can give me some of their background or connection or relation with immigration, so we can get to know you a little better.
Okay. Sure.
So what has been, yes, go ahead.
I know, I'm sorry. I sort of like started off on my own, but I am technically second generation immigrant, but I sort of have the first generation experience because my parents, my father specifically, was the first generation immigrant to the US. He was a practicing doctor. He's retired now. He did his med school from Pakistan. That is where my family is originally from. So the dad did his med school from Pakistan, and he just wanted to I guess if there was one motivation for him, it was that he wanted more from what he could find in his surroundings. So he decided that he would go to the US and do his residency there and then start his career over there. And that's exactly what he did. In the late 60s, early 70s, that's when he came to the US and did his residency over here in I I fail to recall the city where he came to, but my mom's going to be really angry about that. So how can you not know? No, but
Yeah.
my memory fails me at this point. But then he got married in the early 70s. Actually, he went back to Pakistan,
Hmm.
and because at that time there were not a lot of Pakistani immigrants in the U.S., especially in the Midwest. He was in the Midwest. I know that, but there was not a large Pakistani
Hmm.
population over here, and at that time it was tradition to marry within the same culture and same faith. No, although I know a lot of people who also married outside their faith as well,
Okay.
but he was very traditional in that sense. So he went back to Pakistan and met my mother, and they got married in 1972, I believe.
Oh, wow.
And at that time, it was not that hard to immigrate to the US. I remember my mom saying very distinctly that she got her passport within a week of getting married. And I was like, that's unheard of.
That
But
is
it was just
crazy.
that easy.
Hmm. Yeah.
And she got her passport and she went back to the US in 1972, 73 with my dad. And they, settled over there in Peoria, Illinois. That's where I was born, actually. But I'm the third of three kids, so I was the last to be born over there. But uh,
Wow.
anyway, so they moved and settled over there. My dad, completed his residency, started his fellowship, and started working there as a psychiatrist. And during that time, they started their family there. My sister is the eldest. She was born in 1976, and then my brother in
Hmm.
1979. And then in 1982, that's when I was born. So when I look back at that, I was like, oh my God, I'm so old.
You're not.
No, but it's that sort of thing.
Yeah.
That was, the history of them being there
Mm.
and us being born in Peoria, Illinois. But I think, again, because there were so few people that they could connect at
Mm.
their own level, there were some people who were from Pakistani Indian backgrounds and who were Muslim as well. But majority, there were other people, especially Peoria is not a very big, was not a very big city at that time. I'm not sure now. I haven't been there since then. But there were not a lot of immigrant pockets or
Mm.
populations over there. A few that were there. I don't think there was even a proper masjid or a Muslim place of worship over there at that time.
Yes.
I remember my mother telling me that they had a community center where they used to hold Muslim events, like we have the two festivals of Eid, and they used to rent out the community center and have it at that time. But there was no proper masjid at that time,
Wow.
and it becomes hard
Mm.
when even though my dad immigrated out of choice, but at some point you do sort of get concerned that how am I going to be able to raise my family with the same values and principles that they were used to. So
Definitely. Mm-hmm.
it was one of those things that I think got my dad a little anxious, especially when he had kids growing up in the US and in a culture that was very, even though he did a lot of his education here, did a lot of his practice over here, it was still internally very foreign for him.
Mm.
And then in 19, I guess, 83, 84, I think he finally made this decision that I don't think that he could do it anymore.
Oh, wow.
He wanted that his kids to be able to grow up in the same culture that he grew up in, with the same religious background that he grew up in. And in 1985, he completely cut everything off. Like he quit his medical practice and everything, sold the houses that he had there, sold everything,
Wow.
and he migrated back to Pakistan. And it was hard. I mean, it was hard on the family in a way that it was a hard adjustment
Mm,
because Pakistan at that time was still a very much a developing country.
mm.
They did not have a lot of the conveniences that existed at that time in the U.S. So it was a hard move.
And you were just
I'm
a
not.
kid too,
I,
right? It was
I was
three
just. I
kids.
was a. Three kids. I was a toddler. I have
Right,
no recollection of any of this.
right.
My earliest memories are not from the U.S. My earliest memories are from Pakistan at the time
Mm,
when we had already settled there just a bit. I mean, I was only 3 when we moved back. So again, I don't have any recollection. I
yeah,
only have like memories from when I was like 5 or so.
right.
So
And where were you?
I
Like, it's just so interesting. And sorry to interrupt you, but it's so
no,
amazing what you have just said in terms of your dad left, as you said, by choice, his country,
right.
and started this new career, which as immigrants, I think a lot of us can understand how challenging that is to start again,
Yes.
to start from zero, to
Yes.
be away from home. And then to me, it's really interesting to see that once he created a family in the US,
Mhm.
he felt the need to go back and to connect with his
That,
roots, and that's how powerful culture is, right? Like that's
that,
how that you would say, you know what, maybe I'm making good money here, maybe I have a great future and career, but is that really worth it or not,
right.
right? Yes.
Right. So it's a decision that does not come lightly,
Mm,
and it requires a lot of sacrifices on everybody's part. I mean, I know that it was especially hard on my mom, having to leave everything and all the lifestyle that you're used to, and then
yes.
to have to start all over again.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it is a very hard transition, and we moved back, and we had a lot of the stuff that we had over here, like the toys and everything, but you can't bring everything back with you.
Yes.
So since 1985 and up until now, my parents are over here. I grew up in Pakistan, so I did all of my schooling in Pakistan,
Mm,
and I had extended family over there as well. And I think in those terms, I think it was the right decision
mm,
because we were able to connect to our family, which
yes.
could not have made the same I guess journey to the US. It's After a while it became harder and harder and harder for anybody to immigrate to the US.
Exactly.
So my family, my extended family, and especially, I mean, I'm not sure, I mean, how many of your audience would be aware, but Pakistanis have a lot of extended family. We have lots of aunts and uncles and cousins. Like it would be next to impossible to bring everybody over there.
Right.
So it's just that I think that experience with having family so close together. And by the way, we moved to the city of Karachi. It's a
Okay.
port city. It is the largest city in Pakistan, a huge population. And me and my extended family used to live very close together. So I was never without a grandparent
Mm,
or an aunt, an uncle. Everybody was right there.
I love
So
that.
was always that a sense of like your family's close by.
Mm,
We had cousins come over, play, we fight, we do all the things that small kids do, especially. And I think it's very fortunate that
mm,
we could have that sort of family connection, and I miss that for my kids who are now growing up here, and all of their cousins are not over here. That
right.
sort of thing.
Yes. Yeah. And how old were
So
you when you went back? So, I mean, it sounds like you were in Pakistan for a good amount of time to.
I was there for, oh gosh, hmm at least 20 years,
Okay.
because I got married when I was 25.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got married, my husband was trying to apply. Again, it's almost the same cycle as my dad, who
Yes.
went there for his residency. My husband, was applying for residency over there as well. And, we got married, and we came to the U.S. to Detroit, Michigan. And he did his residency over there. So that was when I was 25. Well, I came here when I was 3, and I went back to the US when I was 25.
Wow.
So,
It,
yeah, so I spent most of my time in Pakistan. I had most of my childhood memories in Pakistan. So even though I was born in the US, but I was not raised here.
right. So it was
So
later in life. So I'm
I,
sure it was a shock, a cultural shock to
it
come back to the
was
US.
actually, it's you sort of and when we were growing up, we used to get all the shows that used to air in the U.S. I guess we grew up watching Fresh Prince of Bel-Air, Full House. All of these things we
Same.
used to get via satellite. Those were the TV shows at that time. They don't
I grew up
air
with the same
anymore.
shows in Venezuela, so
Yes.
I get it.
So it's we saw the shows, but it doesn't reflect the entirety of the U.S. and the living experience that it is over here.
Mm.
So when I came back to the U.S., I think the shocking thing was more of how things were different, how many I guess cultural norms or social norms were different. Those were the things that became, sort of a challenge to try to navigate around,
Yeah.
because in every culture you have a little bit of differences in social norms, what isn't acceptable, and even how you socially interact with other people, and
Yeah.
those things take a little bit of time to get used to and adjust to.
Mm.
But I think the biggest thing that I felt was, and I felt very lonely.
Mm.
Again, it was you're coming from a situation where you always had
Had
family
people.
everywhere. I mean, to the point that it became a little bit
Oh,
annoying. You would have family come over at random times at night,
yeah.
like, I need to sleep.
I need
But
some
then
privacy that
you
doesn't
get,
exist.
I
Yeah.
need some privacy, please.
Yeah.
And then you're in the US where you're alone, and in Detroit, Michigan, anybody who's lived in Michigan knows that it's winter
Oh,
almost all the time.
right.
You only have a little stretch of sunshine that we call summer over there. And the problem is, at that time, you're basically homebound for a majority of the time. You
Oh,
can't do much outside.
yes.
And
Yeah.
it just really compounded the
Mm.
effect of the loneliness.
It can be really hard.
Yeah.
Yes. And you said that when you came to the US after being in Pakistan, were you able to move here with your husband? How was that process for him to be able to come in? Were things harder, I'm sure, in terms of
It was
immigration?
it was I would think that, as compared to, and it would be really a bad comparison, because again, when my father did
Sure.
it, it was a completely different era. I came in post 9/11,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
being Muslim, it definitely, and even though at that time I didn't wear the hijab, at that time I was not, you couldn't identify me visually as a Muslim,
And
but
you
my
weren't
husband,
wearing it. You weren't wearing it because you were worried
I was
about. Okay.
no. The thing is, I grew up in a family, and I think most people have the misconception that all Muslim women wear hijabs everywhere around the world, but that's not how it is. I grew up in a not in a conservative family,
Mm.
but I would think that we were very moderate in
Okay.
that sort of thing, and nobody in my family actually wore the hijab. None of the women actually wore hijabs, and it was fine. In
Good.
Pakistani culture, it was not like a mandatory that
Thank you
you
for
had to.
making that clarification, because that's exactly
Mhm.
what I want to do in this space, and I know just to learn, right, and explore those things.
Right.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I appreciate you, letting me express that. It's just that I think people have the misconception that all Muslim women wear the hijab. It's not that way.
Okay.
I mean, I did not wear the hijab because culturally it was not a requirement for
I
me to
see.
be wearing the hijab in Pakistan.
Mm-hmm.
I only wore it very recently after I moved to the U.S. Before that, I would wear, traditional Pakistani clothes, or I would often be in denim in
Mm.
Pakistan, in Karachi, because that was my favorite thing. I would always be in jeans, and I'd have
Yeah.
the long, what we call a kurtis, like a long top, and that was my
Yes.
favorite thing.
Yes,
Like
and
I would be in that all the time.
I think you said a really important word, which is require. It wasn't
Right.
required, because I think that's the misconception. It's some sort of there's not a choice, right? Like they
Right.
don't choose this. It's something that they have to wear. And so I'm really glad that you said that, because it's then beautiful to see that women can choose to wear it or not and carry that culture, right? And with pride and with
Right.
feeling comfortable.
Right. And that's the thing. I mean, I think it's a lot to do with how um, there is a media portrayal of it, or how it's sort of shown, I guess, by news coverage or even like general media coverage of how it is. But there are many, 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 many Muslim women who don't wear the hijab,
Yeah.
and you know, and that's the thing. At that time, for me, the hijab wasn't the identifier. But my husband, his full name was Adil Muhammad Raza. Muhammad Raza, Adil Muhammad Raza. That was one of those things that they used to. Uh, we all always got randomly selected at
Yeah.
the airport because of that, and
So
because of
terrible.
our travels to Pakistan, because we had family in Pakistan. There
Right.
was always the extra delay, then you're extra checked, and
The
that
the
sort of
little
thing.
room where they
And
send you the
where they send you,
yeah,
and it's
I know.
but and so post 9/11, or after I got married, the immigration process was not difficult because it was pretty cut and dry. I mean, he was married to me, unless, somebody has some issues with their like past, they have past criminal history or anything like
Right.
that. I'm a US citizen, and I'm married to him. The immigration process is pretty straightforward. It just takes a little bit of time.
Yeah.
So took about a couple of months, I think 6 to 8 months, but he was able to come here with me
Great.
and, start working. It was I mean, maybe there was a couple of hiccups and things like, filing of the papers and stuff like that, but that is expected with, I guess, red tape and these sort of things where there was extra checking at that time.
Right, right. And I know, I mean, at the time that we're recording this, I think the immigration situation is going to be different like tomorrow, right? Like we are moving in
Right.
such a fast pace right now that things are really different month to month in terms of
Right.
immigration. But
Immigration.
I'm glad that you're sharing that experience and in a way sharing what were some of the challenges, right? Like that you
Mhm.
face. And I also want to explore the topic of being a Muslim because we're going to get to ask more questions about it and
Sure.
regarding your podcast as well. So I would love for you to define what being a Muslim means and what it means to you because I know it has a different meaning for everyone.
I think, again, that is such a personal
Mm,
question for each and every Muslim. The way I see it, and I think, when it comes to faith, people have, in general, a very a clear misconception that faith is separate from how you live your life. For me, my faith is how I live my life. I mean, I don't see a disconnect in the two. It's not like, that cooking or cleaning or taking care of my children is not a part of my faith.
mm,
That is how I see it, because my faith dictates all of these things. And I mean, people would be hearing this and be like, how can cooking dictate part of, being a part of your faith? But the fact is that, we do this because we are taking care of somebody. Either it's
mm,
ourselves or it's our family or both,
yeah.
and that is a part of our faith,
Mm,
that you are to take care of those basic needs
mm,
of yourself and those whom you love. That is a part of our faith. For me, my faith as a Muslim is who I am, and it's not what people understand being a Muslim is like.
mm,
And that's, I think, where my podcast came in, is that
yeah.
people don't, really understand how Muslims exist.
Mm,
It's only in terms of what they see as negative press that we get
mm-hmm.
through because of terrorist attacks, and I would be the first one to condemn all of them very openly, and I have on my podcast. And the thing is, it's for most Muslims, we are everyday people
Mm,
with uh, with uh, with a faith that is different from other people. But the bottom line is that we are. we are required
Mm,
to be the best that we can be through our faith.
mm.
We are not allowed to harm anybody, anything, any creature. And those things, that's why I started, I'm a Muslim and that's okay. That's the
Yes.
name of my podcast. And again, it was not something planned. It was completely on a whim. I had a friend who wanted to start a podcast, and she was hesitant. I was like, no, we're going to do this together. Let's do it. And and I did not get into it knowing what I was doing,
Mm,
but the names just popped into my head, and I
yeah.
was like, let's run with it. Let's see what I can show in the few minutes I have of what being a Muslim is like.
Yes.
And I go from everywhere, from taking care of 4 cats to yeah, that's exactly. I think that's one of my first episodes, is that me giving the entire monologue of trying to feed my cat
I love
cattails. But
so
that
wonderful.
is it's not an unusual thing. I think most people would not even visualize
Mm.
Muslim people having pets.
Yeah, because then we talk about the stereotypes, right? Which is such a
So many. Yes.
yeah. Sorry, you got cut off. I think it was the internet.
Okay.
um, that then we get into that terrible thing that is just put people in different boxes, right? Like this person,
Right.
because they're from here, they are gonna do this and they're not gonna like
Right.
this. And that's something I'm discovering with these conversations in the podcast. It's like, really, we have more common points that connect us
Right.
than things that
Right.
tear us apart, if you think
Right.
about it.
That's true. And that is what the purpose of my podcast
Mm,
is that we are just everyday
mm,
people, trying to pay our bills, do our taxes, trying to make sure that our kids have a decent future, just like
yes.
the same aspirations for anybody.
Mm,
Literally, you could point at anybody in the world. They have the same aspirations for
mm,
themselves and their kids, that they would be okay and their children would be okay and safe.
mm,
And
yes.
the thing is, I don't deny bad people that exist, who operate under the name of our faith, but
Mm,
unfortunately, there are bad people everywhere.
yes.
It's just that it is how it is. I mean, I wish there weren't,
Yeah.
but right now, even in the atmosphere we're right now, the political situation right now, we can clearly see people who are deliberately doing wrong
Mm,
for their own selfish purposes. And literally,
right.
any bad person from any faith, any part of the country operates with the same, I guess, bottom line. It's a selfish motive for self interest. And a lot of time, it's for just for power,
Mm,
or power,
yes.
fame, or money. The
Mm,
three biggest motivators for evil, I
yes.
guess.
Yeah. And just to use, as you said, like a bigger thing, a power, a faith, a
Right,
culture, a country that has
right,
power to do a negative thing. And then sadly,
right,
those few people, because I'm sure they're less than the ones doing good, are the ones that
right,
get all the attention, right? And are the
right,
ones that set the example, which is terrible because it's just not fair, right? And
right.
with this, since we're talking about your podcast, which I love that you're sharing how it started, I feel like that's something people usually feel intrigued, right? Like, where did the idea come from? I also would
It
like
didn't
to,
come from me.
yes,
It didn't come
it
from
just,
anywhere. It was very random.
I love that. I would like to know what have some of the things that you have been learning, and maybe some of the things that have been really hard from facing this topic in a podcast format.
I think um, I think the most difficult um, 2 series of episodes for me was when I did, and this was entirely with my friends. I reached out to them, and I have a lot of non-Muslim friends. I am in a lot of mom groups in Facebook because of I had kids, I needed help. I was alone and I needed some support, and I found that online Facebook, and I reached out to them and I said, okay, I've got this podcast, and I want you to ask me any question you've ever had about the Muslim faith.
Wow.
And yeah, and the thing is, they didn't disappoint, and I'm glad that they asked the hard questions. But then I was sitting there and I'm like, oh gosh, I'm not fully equipped to answer these questions, because one of the most, and the media throws this one out a lot, is that there are verses in the Quran, our holy book, that says that you should kill those that are not believers. So how do I feel about that? I was like, gosh, I'm not equipped to answer these questions. I know the answer. It's that, how would I do this in a way that does it justice? And that's when, you do your bit of research. And, I took help from articles from a lot of prominent Muslim scholars. And the basic point is a lot of it is taken out of context. And it's just like if you're reading a really good book, you could pick out any book. And I think I referenced Harry Potter in that. And if you took Harry Potter, and there is a particular scene, not a scene, but a particular part in which Hermione slaps Draco Malfoy. Now, if you took that part out of context and just took those 3 sentences, it would make Hermione look like the bad guy.
Right.
Because you don't know what happens afterwards, and you don't know what has happened up till that point.
The whole story.
The whole story. And that is one of those problematic things that happens with a lot of the verses that are quoted from the Quran, that they're taken out of context.
Yes.
There is a larger context in which those verses are revealed, and people are not going to go in deep into that context, and that's where the problem lies. Is that you cannot quote things without context.
And I think that's also, I can see how that was hard, right, to address, because the fact that you identify as Muslim and the fact that you have a podcast, and even if you didn't have a podcast, that doesn't mean that you're going to have all the answers, right? And that doesn't mean that you're going to know all of it. Because we're humans, and there are gonna be things that we don't understand from our faith, from our religion, from where we practice, even from the people we love, right? Somebody can say, you love this person, but one time they did this bad thing, and you're like, well, as you said, there's the whole story, there's finding out, and there's also really not just black and white, good and wrong, right? Like those extremes, I feel are really dangerous, because they don't see all the shades that are in between, all the exceptions, all the
and that's the thing. I think people, like, if and this applies to all people, that they're forgiving of their own flaws, but when it comes to flaws of others, they're unable to overlook those.
Yes.
And I'm not like speaking of like big things. I'm just talking about that being Muslim, like if you're not Muslim and you face somebody who is Muslim, if you expect the other person to forgive or overlook your flaws, you are also required to overlook their flaws. And that is for any human interaction, really. It's not between faiths or between races. It's between everybody. It really is.
Yeah.
Because everybody comes from a background, a different history. And that's the thing, it's context. We don't know the other person's context. If one person is mean to you one time, it could have been that person is having a really awful day.
Exactly.
Irrespective of the person's faith or their race. It could be that was just a bad moment and a moment of weakness for that person. Really, that's what it comes to.
Of a mistake. As I said, we're human beings, right? Like, we can't act like computers. We can't just do things by a command. And I think what you're saying, really, what makes me think is this two huge topics of tolerance and empathy. And how much are we lacking of those two in today's society? Like, the fact that you feel the need and the desire to start a podcast to talk about being a Muslim, and how is that okay, and how does that relate to others. The fact that I wanted to start a podcast to talk about immigration is telling us how much we need to talk about these things, because we're feeling, that people are not seeing the whole picture, right? And
The whole picture.
yes.
And here's the thing. I recently had this discussion with someone, a guest of mine actually. The problem is, as people, we have the instinct to gravitate towards those that are like ourselves, who come from the same, I guess, backgrounds and identities. It's an instinct. It really is.
Yeah.
And to break away from that instinct is hard. But at this point in history, and it's never been done before, that's the thing. Right now, with the advent of the internet, you can connect with literally anybody in the world. Literally, I mean, I know that you're in the U.S., but I had an interview with somebody who was in Hong Kong.
Wow.
She interviewed me, and that was, I mean, this you could not even perceive of doing this 30 years ago, and I was alive 30 years ago.
Right.
You could not have done this.
Yeah.
That to be able to talk to somebody and see somebody in Hong Kong,
that was unthinkable.
Was
yes.
You could not do this. So in a very short period of time, we have gone from a time when we were heavily disconnected from one another. Heavily. And that's where the tradition of existing in a bubble came from. That you sort of had no other person but the person that was like you to communicate with. And then with the advent of the internet, everything is now globalized. You can definitely connect with people who are not the same as you, and you can get feedback from somebody who is not even from the same part of the world as you are. There's tweets, there's Instagrams, everything. People can reach out to you. And I think we are not socially prepared to do this right now, and that's where the problem is.
That is so good.
We like the fact that we can put ourselves out there, but we are really not ready to be able to communicate with people who are not the same as us.
Wow. It's like technology went ahead of us in somehow.
That's exactly what happened. It's just that our technology evolved to a point, and we're not there yet. We are not there where we can connect with somebody from a different part of the world and a different culture in a respectful way. And the thing is, that's the problem with my generation and older, is that we are struggling with this. We really are, and we have lots of racial baggage. We have lots of bias baggage that we carry with us. But with the younger generation, it fills me with so much joy that they can do this.
There's hope.
There's so much hope that they are doing it. They're taking the right steps. It's a slow process. It really is. But they're standing up for the things that we did not. And I think that's fantastic.
Yes. It's the perfect moment, right? Like they are really paving the way for what's going to happen next. And we weren't able to do it in a way we weren't. And you're saying, I feel like it's interesting. It's definitely interesting what you're saying about that difficulty that we have, and that natural part that we want to connect with people that make us feel safe, that make us feel like, oh, this is something I know, right? It's a known place. But I do want to ask you, what are some of the ways that we can start to break those barriers? Because in a way, I see you doing that with your podcast. So I wonder, how can people learn from Muslim, and what can people maybe that are not Muslim feel connected and related to with your podcast?
I think the purpose for my podcast is that it's just showing the human aspect, the things that are universal to all of us. And there are some aspects, some episodes that sort of lightly delve into our religious practices, but it's not heavy enough for somebody to not be able to take in. So it's mostly the human experience, really,
Yeah.
that I am really struggling with trying to virtual teach my children at home while trying to start a freelance business and podcast at the same time. So, I mean, this is not, anything that is very faith specific.
Right. And
It's
imagine
very,
how many people
it's
can connect with that. So many other
exactly.
moms or parents.
Exactly. And we're all struggling. We have no idea what we're doing with all the Zoom meetings that seem to we have to connect to, and my child is having a meltdown, which, I mean, happens more than once a day. It's like, it's ridiculous.
Yes. Yes.
But these are human experiences,
Mm.
and that is what I'm there to show.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know if I can really help fix fix the problem that exists,
Mm.
but at least if there's only one person who can say, yes, you know, I think what I need, that the person can say that I think I need to see Muslim people
Mm.
as less as a collective, as and more as individuals.
Mm.
And that's the solution to a majority of the problems that exist with what we're bringing in, with all the biases and the racial biases, the cultural biases that come in, is
Yeah.
that we have this tendency to see people as collectives
Mm.
when people are not collectives. I mean, and I've mentioned this in several of my episodes, that even Muslim family,
Yeah.
we have a lot of differences. There are lots of things that are practiced in one Muslim family, but are not practiced in other Muslim families, because
Yeah.
we also come from different countries, different cultural backgrounds.
That's huge.
So
Yeah.
it's uh, I mean, like, that would be the thing. Even for people of other races, if something happens in one family, it's not necessary that it happens in
In this,
another family,
well,
or in
even
another
in
family,
the
or in another family,
same neighborhood, a house from
or
like one house to another house, completely different world, right? Like,
complete.
and you can say, oh, everyone that lives in this area is whatever, and no, it's not even in the smaller
Right,
scale, right?
right,
So I love that concept, and I think because of this kind of stories, I feel like it's so much powerful to learn from someone's journey and story than to learn from, a set of news or
right,
media or a book that who knows
right,
who wrote a long ago, right? Like, really
right,
talk to people, listen to people. Like, we're so different, right? And
right.
I think that's really powerful, and that's the message that I think we need to connect with.
I think so. I mean, that's the thing. If you encounter somebody that you don't know, um, it's always best. And if you feel that they're from a different background or from a different language barrier, even a lot of people who are immigrants have they really struggle with the English language. They do, because it's hard that you know you're so used to speaking um, one language most of your life, and a lot of times when they come for better opportunities for themselves and their kids,
Mm.
but they should not be penalized for what that one small thing, which is language. They're trying. Most of them are trying to be able
Yes.
to get better at this. It's not a crime to not be able to speak the language. It's not. And if you can just, all it requires is a little bit of patience.
Mm.
That's all there is to it. And just understand that the other person is struggling too. And with immigrant stories, it's not just that they're struggling with language. They struggle with so many things,
Mm.
that they're in a completely different setting than
Yeah.
what they're used to. A lot of them have sold everything,
Mm.
everything that they've owned back in another country,
Yes.
or that they didn't have anything to begin with. They somehow ended up in the US, and they're just trying to make it through every single day. That is literally how it is.
Yes.
My
And
parents were fortunate that they didn't have that struggle. But when I came to the US, I definitely had to start from scratch, even
mm-hmm.
though my husband had a stable job. But we were not like living in a mansion somewhere. It was like a dingy two-story apartment, a two-room apartment, one bathroom. You're hoping that there's no rats in the place. So
And the feeling lonely that you mentioned, like that's so
feeling
tough.
lonely. It is tough because even in Detroit, and Detroit has a huge Muslim population.
Mm,
It does, but they're also very spread apart.
mm,
So I didn't have any Muslim neighbors, and it was a predominantly very white neighborhood.
mm.
So I was were some of the few that were there that were of immigrant backgrounds, and we tried to connect and try to stay in touch and all of these things. But again, you cannot really reach out to a stranger if something by that time I had also had my first son about 3 years after we had moved,
Yeah.
and I did not have anybody I could literally leave my son
Mm.
with, because in Pakistan it was traditional that if God forbid I had to go to the hospital for any reason, my mom would take
Yeah,
care of my kid
grandma,
in a flash.
aunt, yep. So many people around.
So many people are there.
Mm,
And right at that point, I could not afford to get sick,
mm.
because then who would take care of my child? Yes, my husband was there, but he also had to work.
Right, so much
And
pressure.
it's a lot of pressure. It's a very different dynamics than what people understand it to be.
Mm,
People who come here who are alone have the double pressure that they have to be able to make it work,
mm.
somehow raise a family completely alone. You don't have a support system.
Yeah.
You don't have anybody you can fall back on.
Mm.
And I didn't even understand a lot of what social services I could even reach out to if I needed to. So a
Yes.
lot of immigrant families don't. Like, they would not know how to get food stamps or assisted, in rent assistance and all of these things.
Nothing.
I
Yeah.
only
It's
found out about all of these things much, much later.
yeah. It's
I was
really
like, oh
not
my
easy.
God, you
The
can.
access.
It's
Mm-mm.
not easy.
Yeah. And it's usually for residents. So it's usually
Right.
that's the thing. You find things.
I'm a resident. I didn't know these
Wow.
things. I mean,
Imagine that.
I'm a U.S. citizen, and my husband, got naturalized
And it
because
was
he
hard.
was married to me, and still I did not know any of these
Yeah.
things, because even though I'm second generation, but I was not raised here. I did not know this
Yeah. No.
how all of this works.
It's like you were second, but also first in a way.
Also
They're
first,
going back and
yes.
forth. Yeah. And Shayla, just to I mean, it's been so wonderful just having this conversation with you. I do have to say, I'm glad that you're here, and that people are gonna get to hear this. I feel so much connection with a lot of the things you have shared. I would love to ask you what has been helpful to you during this difficult time, during the feeling alone, isolated? Because I wonder if there's other people listening that might have been feeling that way at the moment, or that will, because they're gonna leave their countries, with family, without family. What's something that you can tell them, that you can share with them, that can give them a little hope?
Oh gosh, so, because this is a hard one.
I know.
Um, I think for me, my saving grace was um, not the people. I mean, not I guess people who are there physically, like neighbors, but I found a lot of support online. Again,
Hmm.
with the group of moms that I found online that were able that we had, the connecting point that we were all struggling with raising our kids. It's like
Yes.
it's hard alone.
Yeah.
And I think with the advent of the internet, I think that's so fantastic
Mm.
that you can reach out to other people, even if they're technically strangers, but because you have that one shared experience, that you are struggling with something, and
Yes.
they're like, yes, we are struggling with the very same thing, and this is what I found out. And that was the thing, that since they knew, they had gone through the paces, they knew the system, they
Yeah.
could tell me, oh, you could do this and this as well, and they had these resources, and that was my saving grace.
Mm.
So if there was one advice for anybody who's newly immigrated over here, again, when it comes to bigger cities, I think now, I mean, when I had moved in 2007, the populations were not the same even in bigger cities. There were a lot of Muslims that were scattered all over the place. They were not, uh, I guess, not not a lot of them living in all over the place. But now I've moved from Detroit to Houston.
Mm.
I moved from Houston, then came to Dallas, where I am right now.
Okay.
There's lots of Muslims in Dallas, and that is again is another thing. If you're in a big city and you have um, decent populations
Mm.
of people who are from the same cultural background, they will for sure
Mm-hmm.
have resources for you that you can access in your own language, in your own native language, which and they will be able to help you and guide you. For us, it was the local masjids. If you go to any of the
Okay.
administrative staff in any of those masjids, they will tell you, oh, you need these services, this is how you can access them.
I see.
So it
Yeah.
makes it easier for us to navigate when we're starting out, because and they will also be able to provide like any sort of assistance that's
Mm.
required. If you require financial assistance, or just even like small things like you can access like uh, I guess uh, donations of clothes and
Yes.
food and all of these things that sometimes you do require. There's no shame in it at all,
Mm-hmm.
really. I think that's the other thing when you're an immigrant. You, what people, most people don't realize with immigrant stories is that not all of us come from poor backgrounds. Not at all. So many of us come from very well established backgrounds. When I left Pakistan, I was living the good life over there. I had never, literally never done my own laundry. I had never cooked a meal in my life. I had never uh like cleaned, vacuumed, nothing, jack. I Because it was
I feel
traditional
you.
in Pakistan
Mm-hmm.
that we had maids that
Yeah.
would be able to help us out in the daily chores. I was spoiled rotten. That's literally
Yeah.
that's how it was. I was spoiled rotten. So when I came here, that was another thing. It was a huge shock that you do have to do everything on your own.
I know. I have learned literally to do everything on my own.
Everything
Mm-hmm.
on our own, and
Everything is so
you
expensive to get help. I
exactly.
can't. Yes. Mm-hmm.
So, and that's the thing. I mean, when I can't even imagine like having a maid come in every day, even though that's what I was used to when I was growing up in Pakistan. The maid used to come every day. The house was
I
always
mean,
clean.
it would be
So terrible,
amazing.
but yeah, but you cannot afford to
Yeah.
do that over
There's other
here. But
priorities. Yeah,
yes,
for sure.
that's the thing. That's people don't realize that
Mm.
immigrants don't all come from poor backgrounds.
Nope.
There are some that do, and but again, when we come from such well-established backgrounds, there is a certain sense of pride, like, oh my God, I'm asking for assistance. But again, I think if there's anybody who's just come from another country, there is no shame in this.
Mm-hmm.
Really, there isn't.
Yeah.
We need the help. We are struggling with so many
We
things,
are in
so
a
many.
different country. We're by
We
ourselves.
are.
Like, it's okay
Yes,
to ask help. I'm really glad that
yes.
you're saying that. And as you said, there's no shame. You're
There,
already so
there's no shame.
brave to put yourself in this
Hmm.
situation. But
Right.
you need to understand that you cannot do it by yourself. That's something I
No.
also learned. And the connections have been key
Right.
for me. Connecting,
Right.
asking, seeing how they did it, and you say, oh, you know what,
Right.
I'm gonna apply for the same service, I'm gonna do the same.
Right.
People
Right.
will give you ideas on how to
Exactly.
overcome situations. So I
Exactly.
I think it's so amazing. It's wonderful. And I feel like it doesn't matter in which stage are you at in your immigration process or
Hmm.
journey.
Right.
I think it's valuable, that advice for whoever is listening.
That's the thing.
Yeah.
I'm so no. Those are the things I wish somebody had told me, and that's
a hundred
what I
percent.
would want anybody to understand, that the loneliness is real, and it's okay to ask for help,
Mhm.
and there is no shame in needing that help. There really isn't.
100%. 100%. Shayla, where can people find your podcast, or connect with you or listen to it, because I think everyone should go ahead
Oh,
and
thank you so
take a
much.
listen.
You can, everybody can listen to I'm a Muslim and That's Okay. You can search it up on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcast, um, and literally just type it out on in the Google search bar. I'm
Yes.
sure to pop up. I'm the only one there.
Nice. And do you have any
Spotify as well.
do you have any Instagram account if people wanna?
Oh gosh,
Not yet.
no, not yet.
Okay.
I'm slowly working on it. So
It's okay.
If you can, but you can. I do definitely have a Facebook page. Again, just type out "I'm a Muslim and That's Okay," and
Great.
I'll pops my Facebook page, like my page, and if you like the stories and everything, that's one way you'll get updates on whenever the new episodes come out.
Perfect. That's what I wanted, like a point for them to find it and to look it up. And thank you, Shehla. This has been amazing.
Thank you so much, Veronica, for having me. It was fun, talking and connecting this way.
I'm glad that we did it, and I can't wait to share this episode with the world.